Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to welcome Royal Roads faculty members, students, guests, and online visitors. I'm Christy Poirier. I'm a student in the BA of Professional Communication program here at Royal Roads. I'm pleased to welcome you to Communication Matters, Consulting for Professional Communication. Before I introduce our speaker for this afternoon, I would like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Esquimalt and Songhees people and extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live and learn on their beautiful land. This afternoon, we're going to hear from Sheridan McVean. Sheridan is an accomplished communications and marketing professional and teacher with more than 30 years of experience. There's a reason we're hearing from him today. He is an associate faculty member here at Royal Roads, teaching undergraduate communication courses for the School of Communication and Culture, and in the past has also taught undergraduate and graduate marketing courses for Royal Roads School of Business. Sheridan has extensive experience in consulting in communication and marketing for small and medium-sized businesses, all the way to large global and national brands, some of which you may recognize. That might be Microsoft, Deloitte, Cisco Systems, Shell, McCain Foods, and WestJet. He's provided communication consulting to the governments of Canada and Alberta, and in addition to operating his own communication consulting firm, has worked with the internationally known consulting firm Hill & Knowlton Strategies. Sheridan is active in two professional associations, the International Association of Business Communicators, as well as the Canadian Public Relations Society. Sheridan holds and maintains the APR professional credential, and in 2017 was selected as a fellow of CPRS. He holds a diploma in management consulting from the Grenoble Graduate School of Business, a master's in business administration from Royal Roads here, and a BA in political science from the University of Calgary. Sheridan's most recent publication is a chapter in a recently released book called Orange Chinook: Politics in the New Alberta. He co-authored, along with Royal Roads' own Dr. Chasten Remillard, the chapter titled Notley and the Beast, an analysis of the crisis communication of Rachel Notley during the 2016 wildfire. Will you please join me in welcoming Sheridan?
So thanks so much, Christy. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. It's really a pleasure for me to be here presenting today. I'm aware of the academic communications giants who have been here, and even recently you had Dr. Tim Coombs speaking last week, and before that Terry Flynn, both well-known academics in the communications space. So today I'm going to do essentially three things. I'm first going to tell you a story. Then I'm going to provide you with some characteristics so you can assess your own characteristics to see if consulting is for you. And then I'm going to talk about your consulting self. So that's the plan for today. And once I'm done, I'm going to open it up for your questions. So we have about 30 minutes, and I'll take about half that, and then we'll have your questions after that. So please be thinking about that as we go along. So I'm really here today because I want to encourage you all to consider becoming a communications consultant. Now, from my own experience, I've found communications consulting to be really challenging, but exciting and really rewarding. So for me, it's like living on the edge. When you're consulting, you get the adrenaline pumping, and you challenge yourself to deliver value to all of your clients. So for those of you in the room and those online, you're likely wondering about either your next career step, whether it'll be starting a communications career or yearning for advancement in communications wherever you are, or even switching from a current career to your future career in communication. But regardless of where you are in your career journey, I want you to think about the possibility of you becoming a communications consultant. One of the things I promised a moment ago was telling you a story, so let's get into the story. And I'm well aware that Tim Coombs last week talked about transmedia storytelling, and strategic communication. So my story really doesn't fit Tim's criteria for transmedia storytelling, but I want to tell the story because it gives you a small example of the difference that professional communicators can make in everyday life. So the story starts on a sunny, warm, and beautiful new spring day. The kind of day when you know spring is arriving because you can see the flowers and the trees are bursting out in bloom, and there's just that spring feeling in the air. The kind of day that we really wish we had today in Victoria. So the story could have really happened in any urban center, but I like to think about it taking place in downtown Victoria, somewhere around the iconic Empress Hotel, around the Inner Harbor, maybe on Government Street. So our main character in the story is a professional communicator, and she works at a communications agency in downtown Victoria. So she's a communications consultant, and that's why the story ties back into the theme of my comments today. So her and her co-worker are out for lunch. They're out for a walk, and they stop at Red Fish, Blue Fish. So you know that. It's an eclectic food stand right on the harbor, and they pick up some food to eat to go while they walk around the Inner Harbor. And following their familiar route, they walk past the Seaplane Base on Wharf Street, past the Tourism Information Center Bureau near the Empress Hotel, and it's at that moment that our communications consultant sees an older man in disheveled clothes sitting on the ground next to the walkway. So getting closer, she notices he has a tin plate with some coins in it and is holding a cardboard sign with handwriting on it. She gets a little bit closer and she sees the handwriting says, "I am blind." And from her observations, it's quite clear that the man is indeed blind. So the friend that she's with, he immediately reaches into his pockets, pulls out a couple of dollar coins, and drops them on the tin plate, making the clinking sounds. So our heroine, our communications consultant, feels very compassionate, but she has a quite different response. She tells the man she can help him, but in a really different way. She tells him that she is a professional communicator and asks for his permission to add 4 words to his sign. So the blind man tells them he is thankful because he had heard the coins from her coworker drop into the tin plate, and he also accepts her offer to add whatever words she wants to his sign. So in response, she digs through her purse, pulls out the Sharpie pen. Isn't that handy to have a Sharpie pen? She pulls out her Sharpie pen and adds the 4 words to the sign. So then, telling the blind man that she's completed her task, she and her friend say goodbye and continued their walk along the Inner Harbor. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, what were those 4 words that she added to the sign? But we need now to pause for a moment to allow our professional communicator and her friend to continue their walk along the Inner Harbor, past the beautiful flower beds bursting with new life in springtime, then along Belleville Street to the old steamship terminal where they turn around and walk back towards the blind man. And as they again approach the blind man, our professional communicator happily notices his tin plate is full of coins and even a couple of $5 bills. The blind man recognizes her voice when she says hello, and he expresses his heartfelt thanks to her for adding those words to his sign. But like you, he is curious about what she has added. So he says to her, "My sign said I am blind, but tell me what you added that made people give so much more money." Our communication professional replies, "Your sign now reads, 'It is spring and I am blind.'" So, through communications, our professional communicator got passersby to understand just how fortunate they were to see the beautiful flowers and experience spring in a visual way on that outstanding spring day when the blind man could not experience the same thing. Her simple act of adding those 4 words to the sign motivated people to better understand the situation that the blind man found himself in and generated compassion for him. My key message to you in telling the story is that the right kind of communication can change people's behavior assumptions, perceptions, and emotions. And that is really the work of professional communicators. So for those of you in the room studying professional communications, don't underestimate the potential possibilities of the work you aspire to do. And remember to use this knowledge, skills, and abilities you learn for good and ethical purposes like our communications consultant. Now, let's consider ways you can express your own learning through consulting in your own business, or like the heroine in our story, for a company that provides communications consulting services. Let's start by defining a couple of terms. So I want to define professional communicators for you and communications consulting. In my view, professional communicators use communications to help achieve the goals and objectives of the organization they are working for. Now, other people in these organizations, like accounting or management or technical people, bring their own skills, but professional communicators bring our communication skills to help organizations achieve their goals and objectives. And just like other people that I mentioned, professional communicators must be able to demonstrate how our communication work helps to achieve the overall goals and objectives of that organization. That's what I mean by that. Next, I want to talk about consulting and what I mean by consulting. So I would say that communications consulting is providing communication services to more than one organization. In other words, communications consultants provide communication services and expertise to multiple organizations at the same time. Now, some people want to divide consultants into two groups: consultants who are employees and consultants who are self-employed. So I want to talk about these two categories. The consultants who are employees relates to people who are employed by companies who provide these services to multiple clients, like our character in the story, who work for a communications consulting firm providing services to multiple clients. Now, some people call this agency or agency work. The other group are the group who are self-employed. And so they have their own companies. Maybe they're a sole practitioner working by themselves, or working with a group of people, or even working in joint ventures with other communications consultants. So all of those are possible. So my point in talking about this is really to assure you that you don't, even if you're interested in consulting, you don't have to start your own company. So it's not necessarily about a startup, because there are agencies out there that you can go and work for and do communications consulting. In fact, Christy mentioned one that I worked for a number of years, Hill & Knowlton Strategies, who is a communications consulting firm. Now, I'd like to do an assessment, or I'd like to have you do assessment of your potential consulting self. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a list of characteristics, and I want you to think about those characteristics and decide if you have that characteristic or not. And just answer yourself. I'm not asking you to yell it out or anything like that. So here goes the list of characteristics. The first one, I'd say, do you enjoy creativity and innovation? Do you prefer to work in less structured organizations? Do you like variety in your work? Do you have a sense of curiosity? Do you want to learn about new and different things? Do you like to seek different information from different sources? Do you like to work with many different people to achieve results? Do you like to make things happen? Do you have communication skills in one or more particular area? Do you believe you can make a significant contribution, and are you willing to actually do it? Are you inspired by new challenges, and are you resourceful? So if you answered yes to most of those questions, I would say that consulting is something that you'll be interested in and good at. Now I want to flip the coin a little bit and talk about what organizations want in professional communications consultants. So I think there are three broad categories that organizations look for, and organizations of any kind. So there are three broad categories. The first one is temporary assistance. That's what I call it, temporary assistance. And that's where organizations are looking for additional capacity. So they bring in one or more consultants to help them out to provide this additional capacity that they need. An example of what this might look like is perhaps an organization is holding a major event, and so they're looking for consultants to come in to help them with that major event. But it's fixed term, do the event, and then the consultants have finished and get to go on to other projects. The second category is when organizations want a particular communications expertise, an expertise that they don't currently have within their current organization. So an example of this might be where an organization is planning, like a corporation is planning a major corporate reorganization, and they're looking for a communication consultant that can work with change management programs. So they're looking for that special expertise communications around change management. The third category is actually pretty easy because it's a combination of the first two. And that's where they're looking both for additional support, temporary support in an area, and they're looking for particular expertise. Now, an example of that might be crisis communication. So they're looking for a consultant to come in to prepare the organization for crisis communication. And then when they're prepared, the consultant goes away. And in my experience, usually I get calls back if there's any sort of crisis that occurs. So I wanted to go through these three different situations because I think it helps you get a sense from the organizational perspective of what organizations are looking for in consultants. So my guess is that probably about now you may be feeling, maybe I don't quite have what it takes to be a consultant. So I want to talk for a minute about the reasons and what I think about the reasons. I would say one of the first reasons that people don't consider communications consulting is because they really haven't considered it. It hasn't seemed to be a possibility for them for whatever reason. Maybe they're just focused on other things, or they're focused on just working for an organization that doesn't provide consulting services. So I'm hoping this edition of Communications Matters gets you to think about that for you, about consulting for you. The next thing you're probably thinking of is, well, I don't really have specialized knowledge. And I'd like you to think about what your courses at RU have actually provided for you. And I'll come back to that in a minute. I suspect some of you don't like to network, so you're not particularly interested in having to do a bunch of networking. But I would say you all already have networks. You have networks of family and friends. You've got classmates. You've got professors here at RRU. You've got your hometown. There's a huge resource, I think, is the RRU alumni, which are, of course, all across the country and elsewhere. So you already have a network. And I would say another potential blockage for people is that you're unfamiliar with consulting. So I'll talk a little bit more about some of the nitty-gritty around consulting, but I would say that there's lots of resources available for you if you want to do communications consulting. So a minute ago, I said I'd come back to this, and that's your experience here at RRU. And I would say that the learning environment here for all of you either can be or has, particularly for those people on the live stream, has been a starting point and a catalyst for your new communications consulting career that I'm envisioning for you. So I'd like you to think about three questions. The first one is courses that you have enjoyed the most. That's going to be helpful for you, because if you've enjoyed them, then they're speaking to you in some way. So this could be a potential expertise area for you. The next thing I want you to think about is, are there things that you've specifically learned from those courses that you can turn into your consulting work? I know a number of you in the room today have been working on communications plan and communications planning. You can actually sell those plans to a whole variety of organizations. You just adapt them for whatever the situation is. And that's something that you've learned from these courses. And another thing to think about is, in terms of your overall program, your BAPSI program here, what kinds of things did you find it was really easy for you to do, right? The things that you really enjoyed doing, that you got your adrenaline pumping. Those are all potential expertise areas for you as well, and what you can use to move forward on a consulting career. Now, the resources, I talked a little bit about that a moment ago. The resources that you have are actually quite amazing because the resources I mentioned, but the network, your classmates, the professional associations that you're maybe involved in now or want to get involved, and just the network that you're already developing here being at Royal Roads. So I want to tell maybe 2 stories that illustrate this, but they're quick stories, not transmedia. So a former student of mine went out, he probably graduated from Royal Roads probably about 7 years ago. And he got himself into a medium-sized business, and what he did is he hired people from his class at Royal Roads. So he got to know these people because of all the teamwork that he did with them. And he found that with these 2 people in particular, they were really compatible on the same page. And so he actually hired them. And the only reason that he found out about them was because he was in the program and worked in teams with them, right? So I thought it was actually brilliant because he knew these people and he knew what he was getting. And they've done really well in this small business. The other example that I want to mention, the other story that I want to mention, is about another former student that I have. And I know some of you are thinking, gee, gosh, even with classes here, I don't have expertise. But this student had grown up on a farm, and she knew all kinds of things about agriculture. So she did her communications degree, and right away, even before she graduated, she did a practicum with a consulting firm that only does agricultural work. So they only work for agricultural clients. So she had the communication skills from the program, but she knew agriculture because she grew up on a farm. And so she knew the language, she understood what it was like, and could add value right away to the consulting firm that she went to work for right out of university, well, even before she graduated, as I mentioned. But there are other things to think about in your own background that could help you with an expertise. So, for example, if you speak a language other than English, or even more than 1 or 2 languages, that is a huge opportunity for you to look, even if you don't want to work outside of Canada, look for organizations in Canada that need people with these linguistic abilities. If you have them, it's something that you can use in the consulting world. The other thing to think about is hobbies that you have. So take your knowledge from a hobby that you enjoy and consult on that basis. So for example, let's say you love snowboarding. It's your hobby, you've done it your whole life, you love to get out and shred through the snow. So think about working for a ski or snowboarding resort or a ski or snowboarding association. You already know the language, you already know what it's like. It's part of your experience. So think about going out and looking for clients in that space as a consultant. The other thing I'd like to talk about is to really remind you that when you start out, just start out on a small basis. This isn't a big thing that you have to do. Start on a small basis and then grow it. So for example, one of the things that I've seen is students that go out and they find one client. And let's say they enjoy social media, for example. Or maybe it's writing that they enjoy. So they go out and they find one client. And so let's say they're managing social media channels for a small organization, maybe 10 or 20 hours a week, whatever. And then they go out and they find another small organization that also needs someone to manage social media for them, right? So you just put it together. So your 10 or 20 hours a week has now turned into 30 or 40 hours a week. Your expertise is social media, and it's easy to do. You just add to it, right? And as I mentioned, sort of the example was mostly around social media, but as I mentioned, if you enjoy writing, there's lots of opportunity out there for people to write. Or there might be other kind of specialties that you're interested in, and that could be things like crisis communication. And one of the ways to getting into consulting is to actually go out and work for some kind of organization in a specialty area to grow your knowledge in that area and then start your own consulting work. And so for in crisis communications, you can go out and work for governments doing emergency management, and you get to understand how that system works, so you go out and work for them as an employee, and then make the move when you've learned all that you can from that situation, then move on and use that as a consulting expertise area. One of the things that's wonderful about consulting is that you are actually in control of your destiny. You can work in one or many different industries for many different companies or organizations. And the beauty of it, something that I've enjoyed over the years, is you can actually pick and choose that. So if you go out and work for an organization where you're not doing consulting, you just have the one client, you're working for them as an employee, I mean, yes, you can pick that, but you don't have the same sort of variety. So if you decide to go out and consult, what I'd suggest is don't accept any client that just shows up. Have a strategy. Think about what I've mentioned in terms of a communications expertise and go out for and look at organizations that need that expertise. Or look at organizations where you really like the organization, you like what the organization is doing, you're happy with the people that are there, and you feel really committed to helping them out. I think whenever you're looking at potential clients, one of the things to consider is this situation, consulting for this organization, a good fit for your skills? Does it really work for you? Is the compensation reasonable? And one of the things that I mentioned to you is make sure that you manage the expectations of your client. Sometimes I've seen people get into situations where they feel that they must defer all the time to the client, and that's not the best way to do it always, right? And I think people starting out sometimes fall into this trap. And so I think you need to tell the client what you think is realistic for you to achieve. And that's helpful because then you don't get clients with these astronomical expectations around communications and what you can do for them. A couple more rules in consulting if I can. So when you're in these situations, understand and be clear on what the client thinks you can do and make sure that you can do it. And if there's a disconnect, clear it up right away. But it's also important for you to understand, what does the client want to achieve? What do they think communications can deliver for them? And you can be a part of setting that expectation. But you need to understand their business and what they do and what they want communications to do for their overall goals and objectives. I think it's helpful if you decide and define what it is exactly you're prepared to do. What is your expertise area? Put some boundaries around that and say, this is what I'm prepared to provide. And if they're going to ask you to do stuff that you really don't feel comfortable doing, then it's better to say, sorry. I know someone that can help you there, or I can see if there are people interested in that, but that's something that goes beyond beyond my scope or beyond what I'm interested in. The other small piece of rule or piece of advice is look for continuous ways to improve your work. That's always helpful, and I think in the consulting business, everybody is always looking for better, faster, higher, whatever it might be. Move along, and you do that by doing continuous improvement. And the last one that I'm going to suggest is kind of hard for people, and it certainly was hard for me over the years, and that's recognize and fix your mistakes, right? And sometimes mistakes are really embarrassing, but I think transparency helps around that. And it also builds that trust with your client. So essentially, I'm done now. I hope these comments have kind of sparked you to consider consulting in communication, and I'm happy to take your questions now.